Hudson's output on the Famicom has slowed way down since they got their own console, the PC Engine, but it hasn't stopped yet. The thing is, Kame no Ongaeshi reminds me a lot of a game that Hudson will be releasing just 4 days later on the PC Engine. Machine Eiyuden Wataru, better known in the US as Keith Courage in Alpha Zone. It's not a one-to-one match, it's just I find that Kame no Ongaeshi's model of having alternating gameplay styles between each level, and going from slower platformers where you have to power up, to more fast-paced action segments, you can just see a lot of the same DNA there. But it's also following in the footsteps of a different game Hudson published, Momotaro Densetsu. Kame no Ongaeshi can translate as, the turtle fulfills its obligations, and that points to it as being a very loose adaptation of the folk tale of Urashima Taro. In fact, the game has a subtitle, Urashima Densetsu, just like Momotaro Densetsu. In that story, Urashima is a kind-hearted boy who saves a turtle, and the turtle takes him to an underwater palace of unearthly delights. He spends some time there, and then has to go home, only to find that a century has passed. In the game, instead of taking you to an underwater pleasure palace, the turtle takes you to the distant future where 5 queens have been kidnapped, and Urashima dons a suit of mecha armor to save them. A sci-fi adaptation of a Japanese fairy tale wouldn't fly for a US release, so the fantastic elements were removed, leaving just the sci-fi stuff for Xexyz. Kame no Ongaeshi follows a pattern for its stages. You start in a platforming area where you can go in some doors, you'll get a weapon power-up, and find the hidden door with a statue you have to blow up in order to get the star that will rescue the queen at the end of the level. Then you go into a maze-like area where you can wander up and down through air pipes. A short shoot-'em-up segment follows that, which also has branching paths. Then another maze segment. Then you ride on a turtle to fight the boss. And finally a longer shoot-'em-up segment where you fight another boss at the end. And then all of that repeats. While you're walking around outside of the fortress, you'll find these doors. And there's a whole lot of different things that can be inside them. You could get some information, though sometimes you might have to pay for it. This frog will heal all of your wounds if you pay him. This dog guy will give you a new weapon. You can only have one weapon at a time, so when you meet him, you're always switched out for something new. He can also give you special power-ups that will last until you've been hit 3 times. One trick about the guy who gives you weapons: if you leave his room and then turn around and go immediately back in, he'll upgrade them for you. You can find these rooms where fairies are trapped. You have to defeat the robot head to release them and get a reward. There's also these bathtubs where you need to fill them up by hitting the faucet a few times. The most important room in these segments is hidden. There are doors that will be revealed if you attack star blocks enough times, and inside those doors is a statue. The statue will attack you, and if you defeat it, you get a star. The star is required to free the queen at the end of the area, so without it, you can't get to the end of the game. A couple of tips about the side-scrolling areas: you can fire above your head by holding down up, and it always uses your default gun. You can also hold down and press jump to go much higher. Your regular gun is just a straight shot, and almost immediately you'll get an octopus ball that you can throw downward. You can bounce it off the ground and hit high-up enemies. The jellyfish shot is a wave beam that goes through solid objects. I actually found it to be one of the lesser weapons due to its rate of fire being so slow. The sea snake weapon surrounds you with protective spheres. These balls can also fire, and if you crouch and press fire with them, they release a constant stream of attacks. The short-term power-ups you get include flying fish boots that let you jump a lot higher, and reduce your falling speed if you tap the jump button. The mirror creates a double of yourself over your head that replicates your firing pattern. There's also an item that makes you invincible for 10 seconds, but 10 seconds is so short it winds up being useless. Just remember that the boots and mirrors stop working if you get hit 3 times. Once you reach the fortresses, keep an eye out for these vents in the ceiling and floor. You can enter those to change between areas. The doorways in here can lead to shops where you can buy any weapon that you've already used, along with the special power-ups that you've gotten. The robots also sell tips for the bosses, but I found them to be kind of useless. Enemies drop currency in the form of these E's, and the L's that they drop refill your health. In the shoot-'em-up segments, you can collect S capsules to increase your animal's speed, or P capsules to increase your attack power. How your attack power increases is different for every shooting stage. Sometimes it adds a shot in another direction, sometimes it just increases your forward firepower. You have bombs in the shoot-'em-up segments as well, but there aren't a whole lot of ground enemies. You can collide with terrain in these portions of the game, but it doesn't kill you, it just does damage. Finally, there are the bosses, and these guys are actually pretty good. They're big screen-filling enemies that throw lots of projectiles at you, and can have some pretty tricky patterns. They're definitely the best thing about Kame no Ongaeshi. There's one more neat thing about the game, and that's how there are multiple endings. After you rescue all of the queens and watch their little dances, and then defeat the final boss, you're given a box, and then you have to decide what to do with it. There's a different ending for each of your 3 choices. I can't say I thought Kame no Ongaeshi was brilliant. I felt that the shoot-'em-up segments weren't quite as smooth as they could be, and in the side-scrolling segments I felt like it either needed more platforming or more blowing up enemies. And the mazes inside the fortresses aren't too complicated. I also don't like how when you're given a door at the end of a shoot-'em-up segment, you have to either guess right or repeat the whole segment over again. That said, there is a lot to like here. There's plenty of action, and it's a long enough game that they use a password system. The varying weapons are pretty cool, and so is trying to manage those power-ups. I'd call Kame no Ongaeshi a solid B-tier game. Above average, but not as good as it could be. The kind of game that nobody in 1988 would be unhappy about playing, but 30 years later has lost a bit of its luster. It's definitely better than its spiritual counterpart on the PC Engine, though.